you.
Good morning, everybody. Can you hear me okay? Yes. Great. I'm so glad you could be here. Again, I'm Stacey Alexander. I'm the Vice President of Thought Leadership at AARP. I know many of you are familiar with AARP, but I'll tell you just a little bit. We are a national nonprofit organization. We've been around for 60 years, and our mission is to empower people to choose how they live as they age. And you know, if people want to make choices, they have to have agency, and they need to have some money. And so the conversation here is around financial security and longevity. And as we have longer life, what do we need to do to make sure that we can make those shifts for intergenerational transfer? And it is totally appropriate that we are sitting in here tight and snug, because again, we're going to be talking about family. And so, you know, I'll just say that, you know, $124 trillion will change hands over the next 20 years. This movement of assets and financial resources is likely to have tremendous implications for several generations, including General X and millennial heirs. This will affect investments, home ownership, how we spend on consumer goods, and many more. And yet at the same time, tens of trillions of dollars may seem like a meaningful economic exchange, but we're still dealing with this issue of financial inequity and the disparities in wealth. So how do we look at this great transfer of wealth as something great when we look at disadvantaged communities? And how do we consider solutions that can help us where we are while we still try to work on advancing equity and financial inequality for the future? So I am very, very pleased to have some experts. I don't have to answer these questions because I have this very esteemed guest of speakers here today to help us answer and explore these questions. And I will say that we will again we'll have time for Q&A at the end. But I'm going to ask each of my panelists to introduce yourselves. And as you introduce yourself, I want you to answer the question. We'll do some myth busting. So what stories, myths, or stereotypes about money and aging particularly do we need to challenge so that we can move forward when we look at this historic transfer of wealth and look at equity? So we'll do a reverse. We'll start with Raymond Jetson.
Yeah, thank you, Stacey. I'm thrilled to be here. My name is Raymond Jetson, and I am a part of a national movement called Aging While Black. And it has the intention, the unapologetic intent of calling attention to these peculiarities that are associated with aging and race in America. Aging is not a race-neutral experience in America, and we have set about to call attention to that truth. There are two myths that I would mention. One is that we often think about wealth as an individual or even a single family experience, when in reality, in Black culture, the gaining, securing, and transferring of wealth is oftentimes multi-generational and sometimes experienced even in communal settings. And so there are some distinctives there. The second myth that I would call out is that the great wealth transfer is an equitable process based upon merit. That is an absolute myth. The wealth that we see being transferred was built on systemic advantage that is now being transferred to subsequent generations, and Black people are transferring what they were systemically and structurally allowed to accumulate over time in this country.
Thanks, Raymond. I should add that Raymond is also the author of the book Aging While Black, and he will be doing a reading and book signing tonight at the historic Ebenezer Church. Yeah. I'll toot his horn if he won't. Jaretha.
Oh, well, yeah, thank you so much, Stacey. I am excited to be here. This room being full warms my heart. I'm excited to be along these panelists to share in the conversation of generational wealth transfer. I lead a team of bank branch advisors for Wells Fargo, but I myself am a financial advisor. I've been in the industry almost 30 years and focus on income longevity. And one of the things that I've seen throughout my years in this industry is how, as a community, African Americans and the thought process around wealth and attaining it and thinking, number one, maybe it's not for me. Some of the myths are, oh, I'll have time, when we know the biggest component of building wealth is the leverage, the use of time. And sometimes just the belief that it's not for me, right? So just not having the confidence that you can actually achieve a healthy and wealthy state while living, and you leave it to the next generation to kind of figure it out. And so I love adding different thoughts to the conversation to expand the opportunity to think through what could wealth transfer mean for me and my family. And just like you said, considering it might be communal, it might be multi-generational. The approach may be, one person starts it, but we build momentum generationally for having an impact. I tease my kids all the time. I say, I'm working for my unborn grandchildren. I love y'all, but it's not all about you. And that's just some of the thoughts that I hope we get to explore on today on what are some of the ways that we can generate wealth, to transfer wealth, and bust some of the myths that, we can generate wealth in the time that we have. It doesn't mean you'll actually get to a destination, but you'll actually start the ball and ignite the momentum that your family may need.
Rodney.
Okay. Rodney Bolden, I am head of industry engagement at Morgan Stanley. What I do is I do research on the workplace, specifically around employees and what they're experiencing in their lives today. I also do a lot of our diversity, equity, and inclusion research, taking a look at some of the wealth disparities within the various communities that exist in demographics. The biggest myth that I see when it comes to aging consistently is the thought that I will be spending less as I get older. So just over 50% of people have calculated how much they will need to be comfortable for the rest of their lives from retirement and on. However, what we find when we dig into that, they are woefully underestimating things such as healthcare costs. So, yep, got an amen there. So, yes. So let me tell you, the Milliman did a study this past year. What they found is that on average, a healthy 65-year-old couple will need $395,000 for healthcare costs from retirement until they pass. For the woman in that couple, that number is going to be $207,000. So it's going to cost. People don't anticipate that. Yes, you will not be necessarily spending less. You'll just be spending differently.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I'm going to build on that and ask you another question since you talked about your portfolio, because we really want to understand what's happening with wealth transfer and help us understand a little bit more about why it matters. So as we see this shift, how do you see this reshaping economic opportunity? And who stands to gain?
Oh, yeah. So let's talk about wealth in this country. As of the second quarter of this year, according to the Federal Reserve, there was $167 trillion in household wealth. Over 50% of that, $85 trillion, was owned by baby boomer-led households. Another $20 trillion was owned by silent generation households. So the youngest member of the silent generation this year is 80. The youngest member of the baby boomer generation is 61. So when you combine those two, you see over about $105 trillion is in generations that are 61 and older. But let's, instead of doing generation, let's do age. So when we look at age 55 and older, what we see is 73%, $122 trillion is in households led by those 55 and older. And last thing I'll throw in, when we look at income, so the top 20% in household income earners, they have 71% of that 167 million. That's trillion. So to Raymond's point, it's not going to be equitable. Only 1 in 5 individuals today expect to receive an inheritance. So 80%, I need to build my own wealth. So who's getting it? So to your second part of your question, who's receiving it? First recipients of that 124 trillion will be the spouses. Women live longer than men. I told my wife that. She's like, no, you got to stay around. I said, no, man. I'll try, baby. I'll try. You're great health. But so the first recipient will be the spouses of those passing away. Specifically, baby boomer spouses will gain in the next 10 years about $46 trillion. The next one will be Gen X, and this is just within the next 10 years. But when we look at the next 25 years, the huge recipient will be millennials, gaining from those baby boomer and silent generation parents. But cross-reference that with households. So it's not going to be all millennials. It's not going to be all Gen Xers. It will be those who are currently in the top income households in America.
So, Jareth, I'm going to ask you this question. From your perspective as a financial professional and really seeing, people up close and the challenges that they're dealing with, which clients are being left behind? And what can financial literacy solve and not solve? Because we know everything is not about education, but a lot is. So help us understand those differences.
So there are a couple things that come to mind when I listen to some of those statistics. When you realize that only 1 in 3 African Americans actually engaged in having a conversation with a financial advisor, we in our community kind of talk amongst one another that are not professionally trained, and we try to figure it out and do it. Whatever worked for them will work for us. And so when I think through where we're future-proofing longevity from the financial industry, financial services industry, financial literacy, like you said, is a foundation. It starts it, but it's not all. I think those that are most vulnerable will be those who don't have access to a financial advisor or financial literacy. Confidence, because you have to believe that you need help and deserve someone to coach you along the way. So those that don't have the confidence of how to engage. And then again, the guidance, partnering with a financial advisor, some of the myths around it is like, I'm not smart enough or I don't have enough money. Well, partnering with a financial advisor is going to help you manage some of those emotional conversations you have with yourself when you're compulsively spending. It may also help you when you have complex situations, when tax law changes, when estate law changes, so you have a professional that can help guide those conversations with you. And so again, to your point, Stacey, while financial literacy is not gonna solve everything, it's a great starting point. I think those that don't wanna be left behind should figure out, how do I get in touch with somebody who is financially trained, and expand the conversation beyond just people that they think might have done well. I'm gonna take it to church. I'm in the South, so I hope I'm not offensive to anybody, but we were always taught to, listen to people who have fruit, looking to those that have proof. The proof is in the pudding, right? And who have successfully done it. So they can have the access, the guidance, and build the confidence that they need so they won't be left behind in this wealth transfer.
I'm going to ask for a show of hands. How many people felt like they learned about financial management when they were 18 or younger? You learned it from your families or somewhere else. Anybody? Okay, very few hands. How many folks really felt like they didn't start learning about this, say, till they were in their 30s? Okay. And how many folks feel like they still have a lot to learn? Okay.
If I could interrupt, I'd just be eager to find out how many are actually in conversation or have at least had one conversation with a financial advisor. Oh, that's great.
Oh, good.
Great.
Yeah,
Okay.
I love that.
This is good.
I want to pick up on what you just asked. So in research that we did, what we found is that less than 40% of individuals said that finances were spoken openly within their house growing up. So many people grew up in households where finance was taboo. So where are you going to learn? And to Jaretha's point, instead of the financial professional, what we're seeing, so FINRA Foundation, as I said, I do the research. So FINRA Foundation came out with a study of investors of color. And what they found specifically for Black investors, the most likely source of information was online. It wasn't for other investors, it was actually friends and family. So that was second for Black investors. And for all investors, financial advisor was either third, fourth, or fifth. And those are the financial professionals. And online can be tempting to find out a lot of things. If you want to find out how to fix your toilet, online. Find out how to build wealth, I don't know. I'll just say this. Over 60% of people who got financial advice, according to the CFP board survey, over 60% of people who got financial advice online said they regretted it. So I'll just throw that out there.
Yeah. And I'm going to bring Raymond in this. I'm going to ask you kind of more beyond the financial advice, kind of being in community, what have you seen as successful strategies to really shift this cultural conversation about money in general? Like for me, I remember just watching my parents with a notepad write down how much they owed and subtracting. So it was nothing complicated, but I just remember seeing adding up bills and then having envelopes and putting this is the grocery money and this is this and this is that. And I realized that was some of my first kind of cultural understanding of how money works. It wasn't about savings, but it was about cash flow and how you take care of what you need to take care of. So Raymond, with you kind of being an experience as in the church as a former pastor, as somebody who's been in public life as an elected official too, what have you seen in community about these cultural conversations around money?
So from a cultural perspective, one of the greatest indicators of the passing of information is where there is a comfort with multi-generational conversations, where you see settings where people are comfortable with different generations sharing information. And so it becomes really critical to increase the spaces in which those conversations happen. You know, the first pillar of Aging While Black is recalibrate the village. And what it asserts is that the infrastructure that supports Black life is ill-equipped for the aging sea change that's already happened. Mm-hmm. And so how do we equip those institutions, those structures where people already experience life to create space for these important conversations, whether that's congregations, Greek letter organizations, civic organizations, small community associations, being able to create an environment where it's a safe space to talk about these things. The other part that I will ask is that one of the things, Stacey, since you mentioned the book that we put forth is this notion of reciprocal wisdom sharing. So very often we posit wisdom sharing as this wise sage speaking to the young whippersnappers. And the reality is that when it comes to finances, and in particular navigating spaces in terms of technology or other things, but in life in general, we believe that wisdom has to flow in both directions, and that it has to be an understanding in the framing of the engagement. I was thinking when Rodney was talking that if you want to fix your toilet, go online. If you want to throw money down the toilet, go online.
Well said.
So Jaretha, I'll ask you this question. So we know the limits of getting good quality information, say on YouTube, but what about digital tools? What are you seeing that companies are using to make saving and investing easier?
You know, to Raymond's point, I think that what you just said was hitting the nail on the head and making sure that you have that reciprocal relationship. Wisdom can flow both ways. And a lot of time, younger generations, they are more digitally engaged. And so in the banking industry, we've made accommodations for that. We're creating spaces more online. We're leveraging the use of podcasts and even dissecting podcasts to being the short videos, because what we know about this generation, if it's longer than a minute, they're swiping. So just redesigning our platform to have bites of information in knowledge quizzes that have some type of reward system, and making it more interactive so they can have those conversations at the table, at the dinner table, or at family meetings, to be able to share information of how we can learn together, and using the digital space to do that. So I get excited when I hear reciprocal wisdom. That's something that I'm gonna take back to my team, because a lot of time clients come in thinking that the only way to get wisdom is someone that is learned in a specific way. And what digital learning has done is it's broadened the level of access to teach at all levels what information you'll need to help reach your goals.
Stacy, can because there are two things that I would offer as it relates to tools, financial and otherwise, that are digitally based. And it's one, I would encourage people to not operate from the assumption that your platform is intuitive to everyone. Particularly if you've not included diverse groups in the testing and design of the tools that you are bringing to market. So very often we see things that are put forth as the next brand new revolutionary thing, and there has not been a diverse group of people who have contributed or been a part of testing to make certain that this actually works and that people are able to navigate it. The second thing is I would encourage, particularly as it relates to engaging older Black people, bring your tools, but lead with relationships. Get to know people, allow people to build trust with you, because if they trust you, they will try your tools. But so very often we lead with tools and devices in the abstract of any relationship, and spoiler alert, it doesn't work.
And data supports exactly what you said, Raymond. So, survey by AARP found that 59% of adults 50 and older said they believe today's technology is not being made with them in mind. The other thing is, when you talked about leading with the human, or combining the human with the tools, that's what we also see in data across generations, which surprised me. Even younger generations said that they would like human advice married with digital advice. So it's not, I mean, to Jaretha's point, yes, we have to meet them where they are, and we do that. We have a learning center where we have short videos where a financial advisor in 2 minutes will say, these are the 3 money conversations you should be having with your family. Or here are the 2 of the 4 things you need to know about your 401k. And they're all less than 2 minutes to keep people engaged. But you also, after they engage, what we find is you have to have some way that they can click and then talk to somebody. So that's what we also do at the end of the video. Click here if you want to talk to somebody.
And it's to the point of what you also said, the bridging of the gap, the relationships, all of it. Your money has a behavior. And working with the financial advisor, they get to understand what money's value is to you and your family, how it helps you make the decision on how to save, invest, and transfer wealth. Because some people say, hey, I worked hard, I got it, I'm gonna spend a dime, I'm not leaving it behind. Those are some of the common things when we're talking about transferring wealth that we experience in the context of a conversation. And just to solidify what you're saying, back to Stacey's point, it's just the start. It's just to give you enough information to engage in a conversation that can help you reach a goal. So again, I can't overemphasize enough, one of the biggest asks of mine is always engage in a financial advisor that you've built trust with. Lead with the relationship. Do they understand you and what your goal really looks like? And then now that you've built that trusting relationship, now talk about what are the products and solutions to help achieve that goal for you after you've built that trusted relationship. It's very important.
And if I may
Please.
add one more thing to the community that we were talking about and what Raymond was talking about. There's a company called, not-for-profit called Commonwealth, and they did a survey of low to moderate income investors. And what they found is that those low to moderate income households that were investing versus those that were not were far more likely to be around other folks who were investing. So John Hope Bryan always talks about, you know, wealth is built by the community you keep. So if you're around folks who are actively building wealth, you're also learning and growing, like Raymond was talking about, you know, by just interacting with that within that community. So who do you interact with? Last thing I'll say, how many of you, your churches, do a financial literacy or financial education? Excellent, excellent. That's one of the ways I started delivering financial education 25 years ago. I'd go to the Thursday night Bible study, or Saturday morning prayer meeting. And I take 30 minutes to just talk about some of the fundamental aspects. So if your church isn't doing that, have a talk with the pastor. Bring in a financial institution. We come out, Jaretha knows, and Jaretha's Wells Fargo does a great job of doing that. We also, Morgan Stanley, do that. We volunteer all the time and come out and teach.
I'd like to add a couple of things just to reinforce just how important I believe relationships was. Stacy mentioned I led a congregation for 23 years. We had a policy for about the last 18 years when I led the congregation that you couldn't present or engage with the congregation until after your fourth visit.
I love that.
You couldn't drive by and engage, recruit, share information or anything, only after your fourth visit. And in the first 4, you could only have a seat and be a part of the, quite serious, because so very often these very important experiences become rooted in transactions and extraction.
Yep.
Rather than relationship and mutual benefit. The second thing that I would suggest to you is people aren't just one thing. And very often we engage them as they are one thing at that time. And so if you're going to be talking about money, and you know that with aging folks, healthcare costs are a big issue, then broaden the conversation to healthcare costs. Broaden the conversation to health directives and wills and mortgage. Broaden the conversation so that you speak to people holistically rather than in these snippets that we expect them to be able to appropriate to the larger framing of their lives.
And I want to tag on this because this is a misnomer, and this actually happened in my family, and why you should broaden the conversation. I'm generation, and I'm building wealth through income, and my parents are aging. And my assumption is that they already have long-term care, that they have their plan set up. And then when we have a need, it interrupts me building wealth, because now I'm having to meet their shortfall and their shortcomings. So having those conversations, you know, there is investment risk, absolutely. But the risk of declining health and how you're gonna manage that in your family is equally, if not as more important, and that gives you a broader conversation. So I tell my parents often, and I remind them, I am not your long-term care plan. And though you're in your 80s, you still should be saving. And so I encourage everyone, broaden the conversation, have those conversations at the table with your brothers and sisters. In our community, we have to normalize who's gonna be caring for our aging adults as they transition in life, because sometimes it can interrupt the transfer of wealth, and we don't wanna see that happen.
And to just add data to that, so one of the things that Trust and Wills, they do an annual estate planning survey, and they disaggregate the data by gender, race, ethnicity. And what they found is that Black respondents were the most likely to say estate planning is important, but they were the least likely to have any estate planning documents. So there's that inconsistency. Yeah, we know it's important, but we haven't done it. Start today.
Yeah, I would agree, start today. I think we have some time for questions. We're going to open the floor to questions, and then we're going to come back and have a closing question for you all. Gentlemen, right here.
You raised a great point about long-term care insurance. How are y'all reframing the conversations for individuals who are looking to retire, but at the same time not using necessarily their nest egg to plan for retirement? Planning for long-term care. Are y'all advising them to get long-term care insurance policies out there as well? Because I see that in the community. People don't even, first thing they say is, my children take care of it.
Yeah, so again, to that point, that's what my parents told me. And spoiler alert, it's not. That's not going to happen. I had to have a very challenging conversation with my parents. These are some of the things that we need to do, or you need to get comfortable that you may have to live in a nursing home, right? So that was a very difficult conversation for me to have with my family. Again, working with a financial advisor, they can have those family conversations with you to kind of manage some of those dynamics. It depends on your situation, affordability. There's not a one answer to that solution. You have to plan for declining health at whatever manner you're able. Sometimes that is a policy. Sometimes it's managing pre-bought arrangements. Sometimes it's reverse mortgages. There are so many different solutions to solve for that. I can't say that it's just an insurance policy. What I can say is if you start online, finish a conversation with an advisor who can look at your whole picture in totality, learn what means most to you. Because for some people, caring for a parent in the home may be important. So I work with a builder who age-proofs homes and get them prepared, making sure if your parents repurchasing a home, the door frames are wide enough, that the right building materials are used, because those are things that you don't think about when you're 60 and you're getting ready to retire, that this is going to be your final home. Does the bathroom have such structure that handicap railing and accessibility can be added later? So those are conversations in the context of the financial advisor that they can tell you what's the best path to get there to manage whatever those costs will be.
And I will say there is, I want to add one thing. There is a long-term care crisis in this country. We haven't done a good enough job on this. I will say that AARP has a long-term services and support scorecard where we go state by state and assess the long-term care situation and also share where there's been progress made. And so that's available on our website.
But I want to emphasize the point of not just looking only at the long-term care policy, because as someone who was an early adopter and purchased, now I am faced with the reality of my insurance provider realizing that their actuaries didn't do a really good job of projecting the cost. And so the cost of the policy increases every year.
Right.
So you have to do policy
And
reviews.
so really look into your options.
Yep.
I'll switch this from side of the room. Gentleman been back.
Thank you. When we talk about future-proofing the transfer of wealth, and this is to anyone on the panel, how important is the conversation on trust and complicated trust for the wealth that has already been built?
So I think one of the most important things that we can do is expand the settings in which we are having multi-generational conversations amongst families, amongst communities. And I think one of the ways that families can help is, you've heard over and over again, financial advisors that you trust. Simply because I have built wealth doesn't mean that I am the best person to talk about how it can be transferred and sustained over generations. And so I may need to have a trusted advisor who's a part of my family conversation as we talk about how that wealth is sustained through subsequent generations.
Actually, more in building, establishing the family trust, the business trust, complicated trust, so that wealth is transferred.
Are you talking about trust as an instrument?
Yeah.
You're talking about
Yeah.
the instrument of a
Trust as an
trust with an
instrument.
attorney.
Yeah, the
okay.
instrument as a trust. Yeah, and what I will say that one of the things that I often find is that when I go into communities and give education around estate planning is that there's a lot of confusion about types of trust. So revocable, excuse me, about to sneeze. Revocable trust versus irrevocable trust, the differences, when do you use one versus the other? So I think it starts with education as to what's available based upon, and then the conversation with the advisor, with the attorney. Everyone should have access to an advisor if possible, an attorney, and a CPA when talking about wealth transfer. Because those will be your guides as to what types of trust will be best for your specific financial situation.
There was a question over here, gentleman, right here.
So, first of all, I would like to just take this suggestion everywhere I go. I can just go arm in arm. But one of the things that I find about
Gen X?
Gen X. Gen X, yeah.
So from the Gen X to the, what's next?
Okay.
Millennials.
Millennial.
Right? We were really taught, not necessarily relationship, we were taught the formula. So we want the information, right? So we haven't really learned the relationship piece. And we were mothers and fathers to a whole nother generation. And so there, that communal piece that Mr. Jensen was talking about in terms of that wisdom being coming down from generation to generation. You know, I wrote down your information before I wrote down your name. It's just, and so if I get the information, I can get the information. I got a Lamborghini, but I don't know how to drive it, right?
Right.
So as soon as I take it out the garage, I'm gonna blow the clutch, and I got a $50,000 repair. And so the issue is that, like you said, with the generational wealth gap, right? And this is why other cultures are tending to go a lot farther than we are in this country, is because it's relationship based, it's communal based, right? It's not information based, right? So what happens is all of that money would be transferred to people who can't sustain it within the community. It's all about them. It's about the Lamborghini, right? And so how do we, looking at these institutionals, because our relationships are transactional. Bank relationship with the churches is transactional, right? There's not strategic products that's being set up that's going to work for the bank and the church recipients, right? It's all transaction. And so how do we use those relationships to create product base that moves the community forward?
I'll answer. The subtitle of the book, my book is Aging While Black, A Radical Reimagining of Aging and Race in America. And the radical reimagining is aging being a multi-generational collective shared journey rather than an individual test of mettle and ability. And so how do we create a construct where all generations understand, as a brilliant sister in Atlanta said to me, aging is a verb. We're all doing it. And so how do we do it together and make the most of the skills, talents, abilities, and resources of every generation?
And to your point, I just want to add to this because you made a comment about how do you take something that's transactional and make it relational. It's almost like a can of Coca-Cola. You can enjoy it as a refreshing beverage, but you can also use it as a household cleaner. So you have to take you have to take the products and services that are there and transform it into what your need is, right? So yes, banks have products and services, but how does it lean into being a relationship focus for you? Is it I'm engaging in this part of the transaction and making it more relational for whatever that need is? And as you said, we are all aging, and so thinking through how am I going to start the conversation with my parents and my children, my nieces, my nephews, my cousins. What is that dynamic going to look like, and how we can do it together, utilizing the products and services of the bank and making it more relational.
This very patient lady right here.
I should say right. Right.
I also know you're wise because patience is a part of wisdom.
Actually, my question is directed at you. When we talk about the longevity and how do we start when we talk about the financial, we pretty much everybody needs a financial advisor. And I think what happens is with a lot of us, we start off with like, okay, I can't afford it. Me personally, I have an account with Wells Fargo, which I noticed you spoke of, and with Chase. I have a business account with Chase. So my question is, do I start there and just see, okay, are those services free or is there a charge to it? Because I think a lot of times with a lot of us, we, like you just said, we know what we need to do, but we don't know where to start asking the questions. And I think one of the things I wanted to ask you, is the bank a start when it comes to financial advising? Because I think a lot of us think of Charles Schwab as the first person to come to mind.
So that's a very complex question, and I'm going to try to package it up really nicely for you. So yes, you can go to any financial institution and ask to speak to a financial advisor. There are different levels of engagement depending upon what you want to do. But the information and the start is where the ask is, because a lot of us, we just don't even go in and ask, and we don't start the conversation. There's so many different platforms that you can utilize to invest and to do other things. But where you want to start is to the point of building community and relationship, is having a conversation with somebody and build rapport and trust. Do they understand and really understand what my needs are? I shy away, and this is just me, I don't ever recommend a product to a person when I meet them for the first time. How do I know what you need? I don't even know you. I don't even know what your spending habits are. So what do I put a plan out for? And you may not even stick to it. So the first conversation is getting to know the person. How do you work with clients? What are some of the requirements? And ask for fees up front. You know, one of the things in our community that I noticed, we want everything for free and no cost. So you have to get comfortable with how you're gonna pay for the help, and ask that on the front end. How are you compensated? And that would be where I would say start.
One other quick question that I will ask, that you should ask of a financial advisor: have you worked with people in my similar situation and background?
And we have a list of questions you should ask a potential financial advisor on AARP's website. And we have a resource back in the room, Martin Booker, who's one of our financial security experts, so feel free to placate him with questions too. We have one more question. Gentleman with the hat. The hat was pretty cool. Oh.
Decent portfolios, real estate, that kind of thing. How do you equip and start from behind when you're late grooming those young men? I have two boys, adults. How do you groom them when they're not interested, or perhaps are off, you know, to the left or to the right, and not in the lane, and you're trying to pass that on to them?
That's a concern of many.
Getting them ready to receive it.
Absolutely. So that's a concern of many parents in this generational wealth transfer. Actually, over 50% of parents said that they don't feel that their kids are ready to receive the wealth that they will be transferred on. So how do you get them ready? Have you taken them to meetings with your advisors? Have them come, listen in, hear everything, what's involved. One of the things that I found useful is talking to them about what wealth means to them. What does money mean to them? Because then you get to see and understand their mindset. Whenever I ask that in my financial education classes, first question I say, what does money mean to you? If people say bills, survival, I know they're not in a wealth building frame of mind. They're into let's get by rather than get ahead. So understanding where they are will help you better realize how to communicate with them to get them to where you want them to be.
And if I can, I know I said this, add this, expand that conversation, because oftentimes where I find we have in our mind what we want the wealth transfer to look like, and it's a one-way conversation. Not all people want to receive wealth the same way. So you need to have a conversation. If you plan on passing wealth to your children, have that conversation. My girls have told me, don't give us a house. We don't want it. We don't want the headache of it. So I had to tell them, okay, well then your wealth transfer might look like insurance. And this is how I intend for you to manage that. So as we build wealth in this generation, you also have to talk to the recipients. This is what the plan is. Because I think through clients who have left art and furs to their children that sell it immediately and don't realize the full value, but it was valuable to their mom and dad, but not to them. So you have to include them in the conversation. You can't just say, I'm building wealth for them and I'm gonna leave it to them one day, and I'm scared that if I tell them now, they're gonna bug me for it, right? Because I've had that as an excuse. You also have to include them in the conversation. How would you like to best manage the wealth that I'm building for you? What does that look like?
Just very briefly, and before I share, I need to make certain we listen, but we don't judge, okay? We listen, but we don't judge. I want to be real clear about that. As the father of a now 27-year-old son who didn't seem to be particularly interested in the conversation a few years ago, I sat him down at the table and showed him that after a visit to the attorney, setting up some revisions to my will, where the resources, he has a 35-year-old sister who was born with developmental disabilities, that there was a trust set up for the resources, and that the executor of our estate would require him to meet certain criteria to receive portions of that estate prorated over years. And that if he wanted those conditions to change, let me know when he was ready to talk about it. It took about 1.5 years, and he was ready to talk about it.
I want to thank our panelists for this great, great conversation. Let's give them applause. Now, can I say that maybe you guys will be up here for a few minutes if folks want to have some additional questions?